Not as dry as I thought. So hope this works this time. Hey, we got fire. Hello. So, this is going to be the first episode in Blacksmithing, where I'm talking about the beautiful, beautiful process, the historical process of making things by hand with a hammer and anvil, which is down here, out of frame. So, see, we've got a nice raging fire. And today we're actually making a tool, and also kind of holding down this anvil a bit more. So if I can bring you along with me here. There we go. So on this anvil, we only have two straps, one over here and one over here. I'm gonna finish up those straps because that's a nice, easy project. Ooh, that fire's getting there. And the other thing I'm going to do is make a we are going to make a hardy hold tool, which is this hole right here. See if I can kind of bring it in a little bit. Give me a moment to grab you. Oh. But that hole right there. So I'm gonna make something go in there. I'm gonna make little straps for the feet. Put you back up. So let me. Come on, there we go. So that is the basics of what we're doing today. I'm gonna shut the camera off so I can grab all the metal I'm gonna need. I'm gonna start with the straps. So see you in a moment. So another thing that I decided to probably do while I'm waiting for things to heat up all the way, because I've got a nice burning inferno behind me. That's not the weather app. Sorry, I'm a little still getting used to this. But currently, I live in Texas, if that wasn't obvious by my demeanor and voice. It feels like 101 and is currently rising. That's great. With a humidity of 43, and it says the hottest part of the day, but it should hopefully cool off relatively quickly. And I'm working around a say almost around 200,000 degree fire. At least right in the core of it, obviously. That's not how thermodynamics work. Because obviously I'm getting it hot enough to be able to blacksmith steel. Because that's what I primarily work with. And also just kind of a thing, I'm an amateur. I am no professional. Don't take the words I say as gospel, not even a little bit. Just know I'm a little amateur blacksmith that wants to keep this beautiful tradition alive, because I do believe the lessons we can learn from our forefathers are very important for us to have. So do keep that in mind. I'm not pretending to be any messiah or whatever when it comes to blacksmithing or the final say. I'm merely a hyper nerd who loves blacksmithing and wants to share it with the world in any small way I can, from even just a small little nerd's perspective. Well, small, not small in stature, but you know what I mean. I'm over 6 foot tall, for wondering. Well, we're getting up to forging temperature, so I'm going to cut the camera off and change your view so you can see the beautiful 100-year-old anvil I'm working off of, and we can see where we go from there. Oh, terrible miss there. But if y'all are wondering what I'm doing, I'm drawing out it to a point, because basically what I'm making is a U-shaped nail to kind of strap this thing in, because as you can see it's more wobbly than it should be. You can probably hear it by the ringing. I'm not sure how loud that is, but yeah, I am really out of shape. Haven't done this in a while, and also as I said, it is hot as balls out here, so I'll meet you back on the next heat. So you can kind of see there, help relatively well. There we go. Not used to doing this at all. But got a nice little point, got a square point, because square points are a little better for nails, honestly. So what I'm not going to do is I'm going to incur a bend in it, because obviously it needs to stick in one side and bend over. And probably going to do it, say about there. It's a nice 90-degree bend there. But I also need to cut this piece. Let me get ready for that. Be right back. And for those who wonder what I just did, I made 1 into 2. Woo! So this little guy is now gonna make another point on this end so that we can then have our double-ended nail, basically, is where we're going with this. So, yeah. So while this piece is heating on up, I'm gonna, I guess, talk a little bit about like the history of blacksmithing and the many uses it had back in the day. Because as much as we have machining now and so many other cool technologies, what kind of really started off the Industrial Revolution was blacksmithing. Blacksmithing really kind of came into its own throughout the, well, kind of with the beginning of the Bronze Age with casting and work hardening, which was kind of the first primitive forms. Also the older Copper Age, technically speaking, which was right after the Stone Age. Copper Age was very short comparatively, especially compared to the Bronze Age. But both ages were very important. Each one was kind of the next step in evolution to what we would eventually know as blacksmithing. Obviously, with copper and with bronze, it's a lot softer, and so they didn't need nearly as hot fires. You can really work with bronze or copper inside of just a normal campfire. Oh, that's hot. Inside a normal campfire, but not inside of anything else. I'm gonna pull you back a bit here. So that's kind of why why steel wasn't really used. All steel wasn't very well known. Leads were very easy to work with, obviously. Zinc, I'm honestly, we still aren't 100% sure where they got zinc. We just know kind of the general idea where they got the mines. But, you know, kind of stayed in that area for a very long time. And then towards the end of the Roman Empire, they discovered this crazy technology called smelters and started making iron. If you don't know the difference between iron and steel, it is literally 2% carbon. And this is actually, speaking of steel, I'm going to move you back. Ooh, come for a ride. Pop you down. Welcome back to the forge. Grab you. Come on. Yeah, get back all the muscle memory. Oh, it doesn't want to grab. Come on, grab. Okay. Woo. Getting spicy out here. But the advent of smelters and iron, let's bring it back up here. The advent of smelters and iron, it really did change humanity forever. Because for the longest time, the best metal you could get was a good work-hardened piece of bronze, which basically is very similar to blacksmithing, but instead of it just being, you know, a naturally hard material, instead it was a material that was soft, but then when you hit it a bunch, you're compressing it and basically making it super brittle, but really strong. So, you know, that's kind of where blacksmithing sort of kind of really got its kind of really big roots. Because at the end of the day, all blacksmithing is heating up something super hot, making it super soft, and then hitting it with two other hard things, where you have your anvil and you have your hammer. So the first proto blacksmiths were actually using rocks, and very like granite and other such sorts of rocks. And that is heating up very fast. I'm going to switch tongs. Switch to these boys. Now, of course, as we all know, the Roman Empire, it eventually collapsed. And with its collapse came the Dark Ages. Now, the thing about the Dark Ages, a lot of knowledge was lost within that time because basically all the really smart people died. And a lot of the original craftsmen were captured, murdered, and many other horrible atrocities around that time. Get back there. And thus, a lot of things were lost over time because of that. And so, when iron was just starting to get popular, Dark Ages hit, because, you know, the whole funny little bunch of guys getting together and deciding to stab poor Caesar in the back. So, Empire falls, everything starts splitting, and we're all tossed into the Dark Age. And for a very long time, people were just kind of not really sure what to do. There was a lot of looting and scrapping of monuments from the Roman Empire. A great example of this is actually the bronze clips they would use for sticking stones together. And you can see that even in some things like the Roman Colosseum today. And it was just because they were just trying to get any scrap of metal they could, because, as I said, they lost all their, you know, all their craftsmen. And it was mostly just, again, because there was a slight bias towards technology at the time, since, you know, this industrial revolution is what brought us to this point where we had leaders we didn't trust anymore. So why continue trusting them? Which I think most of us can still relate to in some form or fashion, even to this very day. But still brought its own host of problems. And especially with, say, the burning of Alexandria, which lost so much knowledge, it was just kind of hard, and we just lost a lot of things. But eventually we did kind of bounce back and got out of the Dark Ages and got into what is known as the medieval period, which is where steel really came to its own. Steel then began being this new crazy technology, and even though a lot of people think they're actually using more iron at the time, there actually is plenty of evidence that steel was accidentally made. And heck, there's even evidence of full-on tempering, if some discoveries are to be believed. And that's kind of another whole thing you have to remember about this, is that we were terrible at keeping notes and diaries at this time, especially craftsmen. It was all oral traditions where a lot of blacksmithing started and has ended. And that is kind of the biggest crux of blacksmithing, is that it starts and ends in oral tradition. And that is both its greatest advantage and its greatest weakness. It's that once, say, an old hand dies, well, what are you going to do about it? Knowledge died with him. So, just throughout time, that has been a constant problem. A great example of that was Boots Damascus, which is something that, you know, for the longest time we're like, oh, we don't know how to make a special Damascus. Well, we do now, and we've known since the, I think, was the 1980s, where some students figured it out finally, where it's this beautiful Damascus. Might throw some pictures up here, of where it was a form of crucible steel that just had this very beautiful melted pattern. But because it was all oral tradition, we really didn't know how they made it for the longest of times. I gotta extend this metal part a bit, so I'm gonna. So that was a huge. Huge problem for a very long time. That just through just the fact and the way that oral tradition works, it made it very hard for certain bits of knowledge to continue to get passed down, especially with, you know, things like sons not being born, since that was a pretty big tradition, was to pass on your secrets to the sons. So a lot of the stuff we've learned over the years was through oral tradition. Anyway, that whole huge side chain aside, blacksmithing then really started picking up during the medieval era, where people started learning how to make this crazy new technology known as crucible steel. Crucible steel really tossed them into the next age, the steel age, the age of wrought iron as well, which, again, the difference between iron and steel is only 2% carbon throughout the entirety of the metal structure. Which, if you think about it, isn't a whole lot. The great thing about using something like I do, which is a more traditional forge with coal, is what is coal made out of? Something like 85% carbon. So it's a little easier to get that extra carbon in there. But something that always needs to be recognized, as I'm pulling it down here, something that needs to be always recognized about particularly blacksmithing, and particularly as it pertains to metals, the more you work a metal, the more carbon you let basically escape out of it. That should be more than enough, I hope. And thus, the more problems you get as time goes on. Because we say, if you're working the same piece of steel over and over again in high heat for a really long time, you actually lose more of that structural cohesion between the metals. Well, between the metal grain structure. Think of a metal grain as a very similar idea to what wood grain is, but instead it's more of a crystalline structure than it is a actual, tube structure as it is for trees. And so a lot of that technology was developed throughout the medieval period and onto the Renaissance era, where we started seeing some gorgeous works of armor and swords. But that's for weaponsmiths specifically. What I more pertain to be, because that's just simply where I am in life right now, although I do want to start a series of making a sword, it's actually part of the tool I want to make today, is something to make the shoulder of a blade, which is the shoulder is a transition from the blade to the tang, which is what you attach to the handle if you need a basic or anatomy of a sword. But okay, so unfortunately I have to cut it short today because there's a storm coming in and I don't want to get all my stuff all rained on, at least most of it. Some of it stays out here, it's fine. But yeah, hopefully y'all enjoyed whatever you want to call this, this experiment, this idea, because again, yes, Lord, as I said, this is more just to show off the traditions and talk about it. There's bird chilling out behind the camera. But because again, as I've mentioned, most of blacksmithing just started out as oral tradition. Jeez, wildlife's going crazy because I know there's a storm coming. But since all this started out as oral tradition, I want to continue that tradition of talking about it, showing it off, and passing on to the next generation. I mean, I'm Generation Z. I am the generation that should have been learning it, but as far as I can tell, my generation hasn't really picked this skill up, like, at all. And that's nothing against my generation or even the people who taught my generation. That's just the truth. Is that things like blacksmithing, taking a hammer, taking a pair of tongs and going out and doing something with them isn't really a thing anymore. Same with woodworking. Like, I was very lucky and I had a dad who loved woodworking, so I learned from him. And that's kind of where I got a love for this, was actually going to Renaissance fairs and meeting a cranky old man who was a blacksmith who got me interested and taught me and even made my forge. So, you know, but okay, this guy's telling me to go. Hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and maybe consider subscribing if you so want to. And especially, I'd love some comments. I'd love to hear some feedback on this series. And hopefully next time I'll be able to get to the tool I actually wanted to make, which was a spring swage. So we'll have fun with that. Ooh, it's really wanting to come down. So I'll see y'all later.